I also posted something, it's like separate. I didn't post it as a response to Brandy did. We just kind of, I think, posted it like a day apart, but it was about this question that I see asked online and debated online a lot. And that's, is it wrong or shameful to want to lose weight or to get plastic surgery or to do other things to alter our appearance? And because I know that everybody's lived experiences are different, and there's so much diverse thought and opinions around weight loss culture, diet culture, beauty culture, all of those things. I think that if we tell somebody it is shameful for you to want to lose weight, we're kind of just doing the same thing, but on the other side of the coin. And what I find to be more helpful is to ask yourself, it's not, is it wrong or shameful to want to lose weight or get plastic surgery, but to ask yourself, do I have to abandon myself to pursue weight loss, to get plastic surgery, or to do these other things to alter my appearance? Would I really do those things? Would I want to do them if I didn't live in a society that rewards me or punishes me if I don't adhere to those standards, or if I'm not pursuing those things? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the more important question. I don't want to say the right question, but I think a more helpful question is, what is it for you? Because it's going to be unique for you. Like, there's going to be people that love manicures, and then people who are like, I fucking hate it, but I feel like I have to because I have a wedding this weekend, or I'm going in for a job interview.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know?
Yep, exactly. And the totally unanswerable question that we're posing here today, just as a thought experiment, is if we lived in a society in which women didn't feel appearance pressure, in which we didn't have these exaggerated, unrealistic beauty norms thrust upon us, in which there wasn't a discrepancy between what's expected out of men's appearance versus what's expected out of women's appearance, would we all still be making the same choices for how to spend our time and money? So Groupon did an analysis and found that the average woman spends $313 a month just on beauty products or on beauty procedures. And that doesn't account for the potential opportunity cost of her time. She spends about 15 to 17 hours a month on beauty procedures. So if she were to be working for some of those hours, how much extra income might she have? And just looking at, if we lived in this vacuum, in the absence of these pressures, would we be spending our free time in these ways? Would we be spending our free time getting blowouts and manicures and at Sephora looking for the perfect shade of lipstick and getting facials and getting Botox and spending our money on plastic surgery and online shopping and the perfect padded bra and on and on and on? Would we still be making these choices? And are these choices really in alignment with our highest values and priorities? Or are there unseen forces that are acting on us, that are constraining our choices in ways that we might not be consciously aware of? And again, we cannot answer this question for you. You can only ask yourself, but what we want to do today is zoom out and look at the bigger societal picture, because this isn't an issue of any given individual's choices. This is a systemic issue. And when we look at it from a systemic perspective, that might actually change our individual choices, because our choices might be a bit more contextualized, and it might not. No shame either way, no judgment either way. We're just here to open the discussion with the intention of giving women more options so that we don't feel obligated to spend our time and our money and our energy in ways that might not be in alignment with our values and our priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, like, for those of you that are watching, that are listening, if you want to answer the question in that pinned comment of like, when are your beauty rituals self-care versus self-abandonment? And self-abandonment can also just mean I feel obligated. I feel obligated to do this. It's not necessarily something I would freely choose. Feel free. Like, what for you is true self-care? What for you feels like you have to do this, or else you're going to be judged or discriminated against or treated unfairly, or things like that, you know? And something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about is how so much of what is sold to us as women, or just I'll even speak personally, sold to me as a self-identifying female, as self-care is about taking care of my appearance. So like I see ads on Instagram, I see other influencers making content around this, like magazines, TV shows. It's like self-care is putting on a mask, or self-care is getting a facial, or self-care is getting my nails done. And even separate from the conversation of whether or not you personally like those things, because if you like them, like, great. It's just interesting to think about, of like, that's not necessarily sold to men as self-care, but it is sold to us. And it's so much of it is appearance based, and it's just peculiar to me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And I think the phrase self-abandonment can have a charge around it. Sometimes it's not often it is, I believe. Often we are actually abandoning ourselves and dissociating and leaving our bodies and doing these harmful or invasive procedures to our bodies because society has conditioned us to believe that our bodies are not acceptable unless we do those things. But it's not always self-abandonment. Sometimes it's just value abandonment, right? It's just, my real value is to be of service to others. And if I felt like I had full freedom of choice for where and how to spend that time, I probably wouldn't spend half a day once a month getting my eyebrows threaded and getting my nails done and getting highlights in my hair. I would probably go and volunteer in an animal shelter. That would be more valuable, value aligned for me. And it would satiate the part of me that really wants to honor those values, right? But I do those things because I know that they're going to be rewarded by society, because we live in a society that does reward those things. So again, we're not shaming anybody for making those choices. We recognize that people who fit beauty norms tend to get paid more. I just read 12% more likely to land a job if you show up really well put together as a woman to the job interview. I know that when I post videos on TikTok, they get more views when I put some time into my appearance versus when my hair is all over the place and I just get back from the gym. So we recognize that society rewards these things, and that's exactly what we're problematizing, because we don't live in a void. We do live in a society where there is a huge disparity between what's rewarded for men and what's rewarded for women. And I also just looked this up. The average man spends 17 minutes in the morning to get ready for work. The average woman spends 54 minutes in the morning to get ready for work. That's a 37-minute difference every single day. And is that really because that woman is like, if I had free choice and I could do anything with this time, I would want to put it into blow drying my hair and doing my makeup? Or is it because that woman knows that she's going to be judged or shamed or criticized if she doesn't look put together enough for her job? And how is that impacting her performance? How is that impacting her salary? How is that impacting the other things that she could be investing her time and energy into?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like, does that mean you get to sleep in longer? You have, more well-rested energy, like all of these things. So, I'm curious of, are there beauty rituals that you truly enjoy that don't feel like an obligation, that do feel like self-care?
Yep. Yeah. And also really asking yourself, if you didn't feel like it would be rewarded by society, would it still feel like self-care? Right? So is it really self-care, or is it that you're going to get a dopamine release, which is the neurochemical that we get when we feel rewarded, because you know that these social constructs exist, right? So if that didn't exist, if you didn't live in a society that validated and rewarded these things, would you still spend your time, energy, and money in the exact same way? Or might you use the hour a week that you would have otherwise spent on your makeup going and getting a massage, or doing an hour of breath work, or journaling out in nature, or just getting lunch with a friend? Is there anything else that would be more sustainably nourishing for your being that would result in you deepening your relationships, deepening your spirituality, or actually resulting in greater health and well-being. And I know this is something you talk about often, Cara, when diet culture tells us that something is for our health, but it's really actually for weight loss. So I don't know if you want to touch on that at all.
Yeah, sure. I think that, when we're trying to lose weight, often we say we're doing it for health, but then we'll engage in unhealthy behaviors in the sake of health. So it's just sort of like ironic and doesn't truly add up in my brain. It's like, often we're restricting ourselves. We're not going out to hang out with our friends or going to social situations because we're like, well, that I can't eat that food, or that food doesn't work for my diet. And it's like, when we look at the single greatest indicator of longevity, it's human connection and relationship. So if your pursuit of health, aka weight loss, is taking you away from those social situations, it's like not truly health promoting. And so often we have all of this shame wrapped up in it. Like, and I love your languaging here of it being shameful obligation versus authentic inspiration. It's like asking ourselves, like, am I truly wanting to engage in these types of behaviors? Like, do they actually truly feel good to me? Like, does it truly feel good to me to ignore my hunger, or to eat less than to feel satisfied, or to skip happy hour with my friends and go kill myself at the gym? Like, is that truly what I want to do? And what are the results that I'm actually truly getting from engaging in this? Like, am I actually getting that sense of empowerment and peace and freedom and joy? Or am I feeling more exhausted, more ashamed? Is my time and energy being sucked? Is my self-efficacy and self-trust being eroded with each failed diet attempt?
Yep. Yeah. And I think diet culture is such a great example of this, because all the time I hear women saying, well, I'm not going on a diet because I think that I need to look a certain way. I'm going on a diet because it makes me feel better when I'm thinner. And I'm like, and feel free to thoughtfully debate me on this, anyone who's listening. And I do believe that a lot of women have so internalized, myself included, I'm definitely not excluded from this. We've so internalized these beauty norms, which were put in place by a patriarchal society to maintain the status quo of the patriarchy. We've so internalized these beauty norms that we actually think that we feel better when we conform to them. But it could be anything. We could live in a society that tells us that we as women are supposed to punch ourselves in the face 42 times a day. And the more bruised our faces are, the more beautiful we are. Like, it has nothing to do with what is objectively beautiful. It has to do with what our society tells us is beautiful, which has a lot to do with the patriarchy and consumerism and capitalism, which wants us to feel shame so that we keep buying products and that we as women stay down, we stay oppressed. But yeah, do you actually feel better because you're thinner, or are you manipulating your body to be thinner than it wants to be at a lower weight than your body is happiest and healthiest, because you're getting dopamine from validation the comments that people are making on your body?
Yeah, like the external validation. And yesterday I saw a post from the holistic psychologist, and she said one of the most dangerous addiction is the addiction to external validation. And that kind of feeds into a little bit of what we're just talking about today, of having that thinner body and the validation that you get. Like, that is such a influential factor in people staying in disordered relationships with food, or continuing to pursue weight control and weight suppression, because the dopamine hit from that external validation and from that acknowledgement, and also that fear of those comments going away.
Yep. Yeah. And an important thing to mention about dopamine, which again is this chemical that's released when we're being validated, is that it is highly, highly addictive. So of course we feel better when we go engage in these beauty rituals because we're addicted to the feeling that we get after we do and the societal validation that we get from it. None of this is to say that it's wrong. It's just to give us context so that we can make the most empowered, most informed choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have another thought? Go ahead. I can see you.
I was just going to say, and to ask ourselves if there's something that has more long-lasting benefit, because dopamine is a drug. It's a drug that's produced inside our bodies, but it's still a drug. And we know that when we're on any drug, we have this sort of crash afterwards, versus if we gave ourselves the freedom to spend that time in a day doing self-massage, doing yoga nidra, deep breathing, going for a meditative walk outside, something that really regulates the nervous system, helps the adrenals, and gives us more long-lasting, sustainable energy than this quick euphoria that we get from the dopamine release or the endorphins that are released when we go get a Brazilian wax, which is incredibly painful. And that's why we feel euphoric afterwards.
I didn't actually ever realize that, but like it's interesting. And I kind of want to share like some personal anecdotes here. Like I've been getting Brazilian waxes since I was 16 and I'm about to be 35. So like you do the math and like, left alone to nature, like I wouldn't be hairless in those ways, but I have grown so used to not having hair that when I have hair, I am so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I often think about it. Mm-hmm. I like think about it a lot of like, I feel so compelled to continue to do this because I'm so uncomfortable when I don't, like mm-hmm. in my clothes. I don't mean uncomfortable, like mentally or emotionally, like it grosses me out. That's not what I mean. I mean, like wearing pants and, and like different types of underwear. And I often joke with Brent because he is very supportive of me continuing this beauty ritual. And I often tell him, like, you need to buy tonight because I just spent $50 getting a wax to make us happier. Like, and I will say shit like that, like, so I'm not immune to this. Like, I am honest with myself about the fact that like, I am probably 95% doing this because of the social construct. Yep. Because if I were to go to a pool party with all of my friends in Joshua Tree and not, like, that wouldn't be okay. Like mm-hmm. it just wouldn't. And so like, I think it's like I kind of
would be okay. And other people might make comments on it and they do. And that's happened to me.
Right. That's what I meant. It wouldn't be okay, meaning it would draw attention and people would make comments and, yeah. So it's like, I can acknowledge when I'm doing something because of the culture. And I felt great relief when like Dr. Caroline Heldman, she came in and led a lecture within our program, the Embodied Rebel Academy. And she talked about how she understands that when she goes on a news channel, whether it's Fox News or ABC or whatever it is, that she needs to put on her makeup and she needs to do her hair because people are going to be more likely to listen to the words coming out of her mouth if she plays the beauty game, mm-hmm. if she adheres to the standards, than if she were to go on there and not have her hair done and not have her makeup done. If she were to do that, people would spend more time talking about her appearance as opposed to the valuable information coming out of her mouth. And I remember listening to her say that and her being like, we don't want to shame and judge women for doing what they need to do to get ahead in a society that's structured against them. And I found that very helpful. And I also still think that while objectively honoring that, there's value in asking, like, do I want to continue doing these things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and also just not being so ignorant as to think that this is actually fully what self-care is for the vast majority of us, and recognizing like, yeah, this is the game that I have to play and it's shitty and men do not have to put this much effort. This is a part of my job. And that's not fair. That not only am I probably less compensated than my male counterparts, but also I'm expected to put another hour of labor into every single day that I work for less pay. This is why it is a systemic issue. And I make a lot of the same choices. I know that I need to put a certain amount of energy into my appearance in order to be credible. And that is, it's not fair. And it is a way in which the power structure maintains itself, right? It is a way in which women are kept down. And it is like the most, I often think about how crazy intelligent it is. I think that dominant narratives have a life of their own. And just like we as humans evolve, all life on the planet evolves, power hierarchies and dominant narratives evolve and adapt of themselves. I don't personally think that there's a group of old white men that are sitting in a room thinking like, how creative can we be to ensure that women are continually kept down? I think that this is a power structure that's been in place for a really long time, and it has adapted in an evolutionary way, which is so incredibly intelligent, which is by telling women that our bodies are the problem. Our bodies, the things that we can never get away from, the things that go with us wherever we go. When we're told that your body's not acceptable, you are not credible, you are not valuable, unless you're pouring all of this time and money and energy into your body, what an intelligent way to zap women of their resources. What an intelligent way to distract us so that we're not uniting together to create the political change that needs to be created.
Yeah. And it makes me think of this other creator. Her name is Balanced by Molly, and she used to be a financial advisor before she became a food and body image health coach. And she talked about how if we traded the super expensive, like healthy grain-free tortillas for like a standard corn or flour tortilla, and we were to take the difference between the costs and invest it. And she did it for like, if you bought these tortillas once a month for a year, and then were to invest that in 30 years, which is like typically, you invest and then you cash out when you retire, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like tens of thousands of dollars in interest earned. So the same example here, like if we were to take just the money that we spend on these beauty rituals, and like speaking to Shauna's point, like you can enjoy them and also know that they are a part of society's expectations and standards for women. But if we were to just take that money and invest it in a brokerage account that is invested in a variety of mutual funds, how much more wealth would we be able to build in 30 years? Right. So if we were to take that Groupon study, that $313, was that how much it was?
A month. Yep.
Yeah. If we were to take that $313 that the average woman spends on taking care of her appearance, and you were to and maybe you just do this as an experiment for a year, you just put that money in a brokerage account and like see what happens, like how much more wealth we could build. And so I think it is a really valuable thing to just think about how we spend so much money on these things that we feel like we have to do. And you were saying this before, it's unfair that we feel like we have to do this to be treated equally and be taken seriously, but how that strips us of long-term generational wealth opportunities.
Absolutely. I think that's an amazing invitation for all of us to spend a given amount of time, whether it's a week or a month or a year, not engaging in these things. And if we don't feel free to choose that, like if we don't feel free to, for 1 week in our lives, not wear makeup or do our hair or have our nails painted or shave our legs or any of the other things that we do, if we don't feel free to let all those things go for a week, then that is definitely telling us that it's not a free choice that we're making. So I think that's a fascinating experiment, because also we don't even really know what we look like anymore. Like we have our hair dyed, we have our eyebrows waxed, we are like, most women I know get Botox, et cetera, et cetera. What would it be like to actually discover what we look like? And to go back to the Brazilian wax example, we know that women are asked to remove all of the body hair on them besides whatever grows on their head because of infantilization, because there's this cult of youth in regards to women's beauty. But that's not what we look like. And it would be fascinating for us to just let it all grow out and get in touch with our humanness. And if we can fully accept ourselves there, if we can go out into the world and own all of ourselves and own it proudly and say, this is who I am, this is my humanity, this is how I look, then that's when we really know that if we go back to choosing those other things, that we're choosing them freely, not as a fearful reaction to the judgment that we might get from society if we don't.
Yeah. That would be radical. That would be radical.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to quickly acknowledge Shauna's comment before we move on. Shauna said, for me, self-care, facials, bath, etc., are both relaxation and nervous system regulation, but also I feel when I get a facial, it could improve my skin's appearance based on society standards. Yeah, Shauna, I'm right there with you. Like, I love the facial massage aspect of my facials. The only part that is painful that I don't love is the extraction. But other than that, I'm with you, Shauna. Like, I find it so relaxing. And I just repeat affirmations to myself when I'm getting a facial. And it's like a whole thing that I do, but like, Brent's certainly not getting facials once a month.
Right. Yeah. And we can turn anything into self-care, right? Like, I can convince myself that doing the dishes is the highest form of self-care because it's a meditative practice and I sing and hum to myself the whole time. That doesn't mean that I can't also critique why it is that I'm doing the dishes more often than my husband is, because of the invisible labor that falls on women's shoulders, right? So again, it's just a very nuanced discussion. And of course, getting a facial and having somebody touch your face feels good because it releases oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, the intimacy neurochemical. And I see that Katie joined. I don't know if she's still on, but Katie, feel free to correct anything that I'm about to say, because I know you know a lot more about this stuff than I do. But oxytocin results in us being able to deepen emotional connection. So of the neurochemicals, this is a pretty good one, and it comes from physical touch. Right. So yes, oxytocin is getting released when we're going to get a manicure and they're doing the arm massage. And more oxytocin would be released if we spent that time and money instead going to get a massage. And are we giving ourselves the freedom to choose that other option, knowing that that might result in an increase in our overall well-being more so than getting a manicure would? Right? These are just the kinds of questions to ask ourselves. And Katie, while you're on here, feel free to correct what I'm about to say as well. But I know you have taught me that getting omega-3s, fatty acids, helps with like the myelin sheath created around our neural pathways, and it helps us think better. I don't know if I'm getting that right at all, but this is another thing with diet culture. Women are so afraid of fat that they're not getting their fatty acids. They're not thinking as well. We're afraid of eating carbs, which is our primary source of energy, I think. Again, please correct me, Katie. And so we're not feeling as sustainably energized and resourced potentially than our male counterparts. So it's all of these really insidious, sneaky ways in which we're being robbed of our focus power, our time, our energy, our presence, our attention, etc., because of these arbitrary beauty standards that are placed on women and not men. Omega-3 precursor to most abundant fatty acid in the brain. Yep, there you go. Fat, carb, super important.
Yeah, I years ago when I first started my podcast, I had on a woman who used to work in endocrinology. So she used to work with hormone doctors. And she talked about how she felt like dieting was like the greatest risk factor to women's health because of all of the restriction in the foods that we were taught to fear, and how it is so dysregulating for our hormone function, how we're not getting omega-3s, how we're starving ourselves and running off cortisol and adrenaline and all of these things. So just adding that in there. And then the question is, are men your age shaving? I don't know. That's a question for men. I'm not sure if men are shaving or not. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna comment on that one.
I don't know.
Okay. So, and just thinking about all the ways in which these beauty norms make us to feel like how we naturally are is bad or wrong, and also how it contributes to our fear around aging when we're told that we need to cover up our gray hairs and that we're not supposed to have wrinkles. Yeah, I don't think that my partner wants me to share about his practices of hair removal publicly. So I'm not going to speak to that, but thank you for your question. So it contributes to fear around aging, where another dominant narrative in our society is that women lose value as they age. And when we believe that story, when we believe that the way that our hair naturally grows as we get older isn't acceptable and we need to cover it up or else our age will be outed and then we'll be judged, we're internalizing that, right? We're internalizing that fear of us becoming older and wiser. And oh, I did not mean to do that.
Yeah.
It's just another way in which we are asked to disembody and disown our power as women.
Mm-hmm.
It says, yeah.
Go ahead, you can read her quote.
She says, especially for women with dieting and high cortisol makes it impossible to get healthy weight related to the hormone imbalances from stress affecting thyroid and everything else. Yeah. That's a great point. And every time we internalize these beauty norms and we believe that we have to put all of this energy and upkeep in order to be socially acceptable, then of course that's increasing our stress levels. And of course that's decreasing our overall health.
Yeah. And I don't remember what celebrity it was. I think it was Kate Winslet, but it could have been somebody else. But she was saying, like, it's not that men age better than women. It's just that men are allowed to age. It's just men are allowed to age. Women are not. We are, you know what I mean? Like we're held to this crazy standard, and we can't deny the fact that the standard is real and the rewards and punishments are real.
Yep.
And like you had said earlier, like it is unfair. And it's like, so what do we do about it? It's like, well, we have to, it's all an internal, you get to decide for yourself. What do you want to engage in and to what extent?
Yep. And it's going to be a really nuanced process for everyone. It's not going to be black and white. And like for me, for example, and this is not to shame anybody out there who's made different choices. Again, our process of analyzing the pros and cons of all of this is nuanced and particular to each person. But for me, I'm okay with putting on some makeup to create a TikTok. I've seen that I get more views when I do that, when I look more presentable, which we could spend a whole hour unpacking what that means for women and how we've internalized the notion of what it is to be presentable. But for me, it's like, all right, this is not really the way in which I want to spend this time. There's a whole lot of other things I would rather do. I would much rather sit on the couch and snuggle my puppies than spend 15 minutes putting makeup on and getting ready to film a video. But okay, that's a choice that I'm going to make. On the other hand, I was in the modeling industry for a very long time. And I know that if I got breast implants, I would have been benefited in that industry. I probably would have made more money. I probably would have booked more jobs. And to me, that would have been self-abandonment. To me, that would have been violating my body, decreasing my pleasure, and putting a foreign entity into my body that is releasing toxins, etc. So that's not something that for me in my analysis, based on my values, that's not a choice that I'm going to make. And this whole conversation is just to encourage us all as women to give ourselves permission to really get real and honest with ourselves about what our values and priorities are, and to know that if you don't want to shave your legs, you don't have to. And yes, you might be judged for it, and who cares? Are you willing to be with that judgment more than you're willing to be with your own self-abandonment?
Yeah, that's been a big one these days, of like seeing how many women online like have stopped shaving. They're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And they're not doing it. And they're like, I don't care about the judgment or the pressure. I am opting out. And for them choosing to opt out, it's great for them. Like the fact that they felt like they could make that choice, that they felt empowered to make that choice, that they were allowing their humanity to exist. Like I think I posted a reel not too long ago, and I think it was like, your humanness is not gross. And it was exactly speaking to that, like your wrinkles, your round tummy, your stretch marks from giving birth, or the stretch marks from growing really tall, or your wrinkles or your gray hair, like your humanness is not gross. And when you are believing that your humanness is gross, like that's capitalistic patriarchal beauty standards. And like you had said this in your article on Elephant Journal about how like often women police women about this, like women will police women around upholding the beauty standards. And so it's also an invitation to look at, like, do I judge my friends when they are not put together? You know, like, I think that's also a really interesting thing to explore as well.
Yep. Yeah. And it definitely requires a getting used to process, which is uncomfortable. So my sister is super inspiring to me in that she's chosen to forego all of those things. She's like, it is not, to me, a valuable use of my time to shave my legs and armpits or remove any body hair from myself or my body. And I love myself no matter how much hair I have on my body. And I know that she's gotten a lot of negative criticism. She's had women tell her that she's gross, that she shouldn't wear shorts if she's not going to shave her legs. And it's all coming from women, which is really interesting. And she had to be with that intensity. And then everybody in her world related to a new normal. It's like, okay, this is the choice that she's making, and we've accepted it. But that gap between people being used to you engaging in these beauty procedures and then you choosing not to do it anymore requires a period of you being with the intensity of potential judgment and criticism, which is tough. And also, are you willing to be with all of those things so that you can honor yourself and honor your own values and honor your own priorities? Or are you just making these choices because you're afraid of having to sit with judgment or criticism?
And like really earlier on, there was a question posed of like, what do we do, right? Like, since the pressure is real, since the rewards and punishments are real, since the judgment can be real, what's left to do? And it really just comes down to choice. You choose to engage in what you choose to engage in, and you opt out and reject what you want to opt out of and what you want to reject. And you have to ask yourself, like, what is it costing me to do these things that I don't want to do? And would it be liberating for me to let some of these things go? And, you know, that's going to be an individual decision. But I think, you know, bringing it back also to the area of like weight loss and dieting is you have to ask yourself, like, is it really, am I really better off? Am I really happier and healthier engaging in all of these restrictive behaviors, in being in this yo-yo cycle and obsessing about food and skipping out on social events? Am I really happier and healthier engaging in those things than I would be standing up to judgment, than I would be choosing myself even in the face of this, you know, size stigma that is very real? You have to ask yourself, like, am I better off participating in this weight stigma and this size oppression than I would be standing up to it and choosing myself as I am, and working on body acceptance and working on surrounding myself with a community who is going to accept me at my natural size?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I think potentially another helpful question to ask ourselves is, what percentage of my time am I doing something to my body versus for my body? Ideally, I think it should be more of our time spent doing something for our bodies rather than to our bodies. And what I mean by that is doing something to your body is manipulating the way that your natural body looks, versus doing something for your body is something that's actually regenerative to your body. For me, that would be something like just simply going out in the sunshine, getting my vitamin D3 and meditating for 15 minutes, doing deep, relaxing yin yoga, versus feeling like I have to go to the gym so I can do my ab crunches so that my abs look good when I wear a swimsuit. Or taking a long bath, which you might not have time for if you feel like you need to shower and blow dry your hair and then put on your makeup. So just getting curious about, to what extent am I doing things for versus to my body? And you brought up a great point when we were brainstorming before this call about, we can reflect on how we all were during COVID when we weren't going out in society every day. Maybe we weren't going into the office. Did we make different choices? Did we feel freer to make different choices in certain cases?
Yeah. Like, did we spend less time getting dressed, doing our hair, doing our makeup, or were those practices that we released because we were no longer going out in the world? And I think that's just like an interesting thought exercise for yourself to kind of take inventory
Mhm.
of your relationship to these beauty practices and if they're self-care versus self-abandonment. So we are coming up on that 45-minute mark. I know we get kicked off in an hour, so maybe we can, you know, wrap this up. If there's anybody in the anybody who has any questions or comments before we wrap up, you know, feel free to ask. But
Yep. And the last thing I wanted to say real quick, which I meant to mention before, is I think it's important for us to know that on average, women have 5 fewer hours of free time a week than men do, right? So we already have less time to take care of ourselves, less time to invest in our mental, physical, spiritual, social health. And therefore, that free time that we do have is even more valuable in comparison to our male counterparts on average. So just worth thinking about and considering in this conversation. But yeah, any questions or comments, reflections from anyone who's tuning in?
Yeah. And this was great to chat with you, B. We haven't done a live in a long time. And thank you to everybody who popped on and who left things in the comments and all those things. We really appreciate it. And this was a fun convo.
This was. I always have so much fun just shooting the shit with you. And hopefully it was valuable for people who tuned in.
Yes, yes. Thank you guys so much. We're going to save this to our account so you can check it out again.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.